Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that will either wake you up or shake you up. But either way, it's going to move you. I once sat across from a 92-year-old woman whose eyes still burned with the fire of truth. A woman who had lived through wars, recessions, heartbreaks, miracles, and movements. She didn't speak fast, but when she did, you listened. Why? Because when someone has seen nearly a century of life and still holds wisdom in her smile, you stop scrolling, you stop whining, you stop delaying, and you start listening. Most people go through life sitting on gold mines, waiting for someone to give them permission to dig. They wait for applause before they perform, wait for confirmation before they commit, and wait for guarantees before they begin. But the truth is, if you're always waiting for permission, you'll die waiting. There is no committee coming to hand you your destiny on a silver platter. The vision was already placed inside of you the day you were born. The evidence of your purpose is in your desire, not your circumstances. The minute you feel that pull to do more, be more, create more, it means the green light is already on. You don't need to ask the world to validate what God already assigned. The most successful people in history weren't the most qualified. They were the most committed to showing up. And this is the difference that separates movers from mourners. People who are constantly preparing versus those who start building with what they've got. The longer you wait to feel ready, the more likely you are to never start at all. Readiness is a lie dressed in procrastination. That 92-year-old woman said it best, life won't wait for you to get ready. And isn't that the truth? Opportunities don't pause while you decide whether you're worthy. Time won't stop while you figure it all out. The train moves whether you're on it or not, and you'll either move with intention or look back one day and wish you had. Potential without execution is the slowest form of regret. When you speak, you program your environment. Every word you release carries an energy that either builds your future or buries it. Words are not just sounds, they're seeds. Speak doubt, you'll harvest delay. Speak fear, you'll harvest failure. But speak belief, speak power, speak expectation, and you start shaping a reality that reflects your destiny. The elder woman said, stop rehearsing the worst and start declaring the best. That's a principle most people ignore. They call it realism, but it's really just disguised fear. What you repeatedly say out loud becomes a script for your life. So if you want a new outcome, write a new script with your words. The people who claim they're stuck often aren't trapped by circumstance. They're trapped by hesitation. You're not in a prison. You're just holding the keys and refusing to open the door. Fear isn't what stops people. Indecision does. The old woman looked me dead in the eye and said, you're not stuck. You're just scared. It was sharp, but it was true. Fear will dress itself up in logic and call itself practicality. But no amount of logic will lead you to freedom if it keeps you frozen. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's movement in spite of it. You can't conquer what you won't confront. Humility has been misunderstood for far too long. It's not shrinking to make others comfortable. It's not denying your talent to avoid attention. True humility is owning your greatness without needing to prove it. It's quiet confidence backed by action. The world has enough people hiding in corners waiting to be discovered. But the truth is, no one's coming to find you. You must present yourself. You must bring your gift forward not with arrogance, but with certainty. Certainty that what you've been given isn't for your benefit alone. It's meant to serve others. But it can't serve if it's silenced. People ask for miracles but won't make moves. They beg for breakthrough but won't build. The truth is, you can't be lazy in the natural and expect God to be generous in the supernatural. God will bless the work of your hands, not the intentions of your heart. You want more. Do more. You want increase. Sow more. You want doors to open? Start knocking. This is not about hustle culture. It's about obedience. It's about aligning your actions with your assignment. You've been praying for signs, but often the instruction was already given. Miracles don't follow idleness. They follow motion. One of the most dangerous lies you can believe is that you need more time. Time is not the issue, clarity is. And once you get clear, you must get moving. The longer you wait, the louder your excuses become. You'll convince yourself it's wisdom when it's really just delay. You'll say, I'm preparing, but really you're procrastinating. Preparation has a finish line. If you've been preparing for 5 years, you're not preparing, you're avoiding. When your purpose becomes your priority, excuses lose their power. Action breaks the back of fear. The very thing you've been avoiding is the thing that holds your next level. If you keep waiting for the stars to align, you'll miss your moment. Destiny doesn't come with a countdown timer or a perfect environment. It comes disguised as inconvenience. It comes in uncomfortable packages. And it almost always arrives when you're underqualified, unsure, and unprepared. But if you step anyway, the next step reveals itself. Doors open after you move, not before. You don't need a full plan. You need a made-up mind. Too many people are planning their legacy while ignoring their moment. Legacy isn't built in theory. It's built in action. The world is not changed by people who are qualified. It's changed by people who are committed. Readiness is one of the greatest illusions people fall for. It's a trap dressed up in responsibility, caution, and perfectionism. People say, I'm not ready yet. But the truth is they're just afraid to move before they're certain. Let me tell you, certainty doesn't come first, action does. And through action, clarity is born. The people who are making waves in the world, the ones building wealth, creating change, starting movements, they didn't start because they were fully ready. They started because they were unwilling to let another year pass by with their dream sitting on the shelf. The longer you wait to feel comfortable, the further you push your calling out of reach. The old woman who shared her wisdom with me had lived long enough to know that comfort is a liar. She said, comfort will convince you that playing it safe is smart until you realize safety kept you small. And she was right. Growth doesn't happen in the comfortable zones. Growth happens when you step into situations that make your heart race, your palms sweat, and your mind scream, what if I fail? That's the edge of destiny. That's where purpose begins to stretch itself. No one who did anything significant ever started from a place of full preparation. They started from a place of decision. They decided that waiting another day was more dangerous than failing forward. You don't get to a new level by repeating old patterns. You don't break cycles with the same thinking that created them. And yet, people wait. They wait for more confidence, more support, more money, more time. But none of those things magically appear. They're generated after you move. You don't get confidence by thinking about acting. You get confidence by acting. The first time will be messy. The second time might still feel rough. But by the 10th, the 20th, the 100th, you've built momentum. And momentum creates magnetism. The world starts to notice people who move. And opportunities follow movement, not meditation. We live in a world that praises planning but punishes pausing. And I'm not talking about mindful rest or intentional reflection. I'm talking about the paralysis of overthinking. You plan and plan and plan, and 5 years later, the idea is still just an idea. The business is still just a dream. The change is still just a concept. At some point, you have to admit that the planning is no longer preparation. It's a stall tactic. It's fear in disguise. You've told yourself, I just need a little more time. But deep down, you know what you really need is the courage to leap. We keep glorifying the idea of starting when the timing is right. But timing is rarely perfect. Life doesn't show up on schedule. Destiny doesn't operate on your calendar. The right time is rarely obvious. It becomes right because you decided to act. You turned that messy, unprepared, imperfect moment into a launching pad. You said, I don't have it all, but I have enough to begin. And that's where power starts to grow. That's when favor starts to flow. The myth that successful people were more ready than you is exactly that, a myth. They were just willing to go when others were still trying to get all their ducks in a row. You can't keep telling yourself that you're waiting on a sign when every part of your soul already feels the call. That tug in your spirit, that constant sense that you're meant for more, that's not restlessness, that's revelation. That's purpose trying to pull you out of hiding. And every time you silence it with doubt or delay, you shrink your own capacity. You weren't created to live on standby. You weren't born to blend in, to wait in the hallway of life hoping someone opens a door. You were built to build, to lead. But nothing happens until you decide to stop treating readiness like a requirement and start treating it like a result. The idea that success only comes to the most prepared is dangerous because it keeps people paralyzed in perfection. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs, speakers, leaders, and creators began when they were completely uncertain about how it would work out. But they knew it had to begin somewhere. They didn't have all the steps mapped out. They just had one word: start. And they did. They moved with what they had, trusted the process, adjusted along the way, and learned more by doing than by thinking. What you'll discover is that your movement invites mentorship, favor, provision, and insight that never shows up until you're already in motion. Preparation has its place, but there's a point where it becomes resistance. You've taken the courses, watched the videos, listened to the podcasts. You know more than enough to begin, but knowledge without application is wasted wisdom. It's not more information you need, it's execution. Execution is the bridge between potential and fulfillment. You'll never feel perfectly ready, but readiness isn't the gatekeeper to your purpose. Willingness is willingness to be uncomfortable, willingness to fail forward, willingness to start small and stay consistent. Because every great outcome begins with one simple, often terrifying step beginning before you feel ready. Words are more than sounds. They're declarations of belief, announcements of expectation, and blueprints for the life you're building. When you open your mouth, you are not simply reacting, you're creating. Every sentence becomes a seed. Every phrase takes root. And eventually, your life grows to reflect the vocabulary you've allowed to dominate your spirit. If you constantly speak problems, you amplify them. If you constantly speak doubt, you live in hesitation. But when you speak vision, you start moving toward it. That 92-year-old woman understood this in a way most people miss. She didn't speak about her limitations. She spoke about her legacy, about what was still possible, about what could happen even now. She said, what you say is what you see, and what you see is where you go. The tragedy for many is not that they're powerless, It's that they've spent years using their power against themselves. They curse their own potential every day and call it honesty. They say things like, I could never do that. People like me don't win. Nothing ever works out for me. And then they're surprised when nothing changes. That's not humility. That's self-sabotage disguised as modesty. The tongue can bless or break, build or bury, move or muffle. And if you're not intentional with your words, you will end up constructing a life that reflects your fears instead of your faith. That's why the old woman said, stop rehearsing the worst. Because the worst is not inevitable. It's just repeated too often. When you rehearse fear, you live fear. When you meditate on limitation, it becomes your ceiling. Your life starts to shrink to fit the story you keep telling yourself. But the moment you shift the narrative, the moment you start speaking with purpose, things begin to change. That doesn't mean everything gets easier. It means you stop expecting defeat. You stop bracing for disappointment. You stop building fallback plans for failure and start building frameworks for breakthrough. This is why some people seem to attract opportunities while others repel them. It's not just mindset, it's mouth set. It's the daily discipline of using your voice to prophesy your future instead of protecting your past. It's not enough to think positively. You have to speak boldly. You have to make your mouth your ally. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and most people are dying by slow self-inflicted cuts of negative self-talk. You don't even realize it sometimes. Those little statements like, I'm not that smart. This is too hard. I'm too late. I'm too old. Die. Each one is a quiet agreement with limitation, and every agreement is a contract. But you have the authority to break that contract with one new declaration. I am capable. I am chosen. I am prepared for what's next. That's how you start shifting your environment, by commanding it with conviction. This isn't some fluffy self-help trick. This is fundamental truth. People who have mastered their lives have also mastered their language. They speak with clarity. They don't entertain confusion. They don't flirt with doubt. They declare, and their declaration brings direction. The old woman said, declare the best, because she had seen what happened when people didn't. She'd watched friends, family, neighbors waste decades speaking defeat and wondering why they couldn't move forward. And she understood that the mind believes what the mouth repeats. So if you want to renew your mind, you must retrain your mouth. Sometimes it's not your environment that's toxic. It's your expression. You can be in the right place, around the right people, with the right idea, but if your speech is filled with fear, nothing will grow. The seed may be right, but the soil is poison. People disqualify themselves from blessings because they've convinced themselves they can't receive them. They say, it's too big for me. That's not my lane. I could never afford that. And unknowingly reject the very thing they were designed for. Your words carry energy, and that energy either opens doors or keeps them closed. And no matter how much you hope, you will never rise above what your mouth refuses to accept. The truth is, every day you are reinforcing one of two things, your fear or your faith. And reinforcement isn't passive, it's active. You're doing it in your conversations, in your quiet thoughts, in the things you say under your breath. You think it's harmless, but it's forming a framework. And the more you speak it, the more you believe it. That's why change doesn't start with action. It starts with articulation. The words you use frame the world you live in. Speak lack, and you'll see lack. Speak strength, and you'll find strength. The very first act of creation began with speech, let there, and from that utterance, existence unfolded. Your words hold that same generative power. It's time to stop using your voice to describe your limitations and start using it to define your future. Don't let your speech be a record of pain. Let it be a prophecy of purpose. Don't echo what happened to you. Declare what's going to happen through you. Because if you keep speaking what you don't want, you'll keep receiving what you never needed. And the moment you make a decision to use your words as tools of transformation instead of weapons of self-doubt, everything around you begins to align. What you say today becomes the shape of your tomorrow. Speak wisely. Speak boldly. Speak life. Most people who say they're stuck aren't actually stuck. They're standing still by choice, rooted in fear that's disguised as logic. They talk about being trapped in a job, a relationship, a mindset, or a cycle. But what they're really experiencing is the result of repeated hesitation. Life will always offer moments of discomfort, but it's not those moments that determine our path, it's our response to them. When you believe you're stuck, you stop looking for options. But when you realize that fear has just frozen your movement, suddenly doors start to appear. And that 92-year-old woman knew it. She said, "You're not stuck, baby. You're just scared." And when someone who has lived almost a century says it with that kind of certainty, you listen. It's easy to convince yourself that fear is wisdom. You call it being cautious, being realistic, being strategic. But more often than not, those words are just a cover for paralysis. You tell yourself, I just need more time, or I'm thinking it through. But deep down, you know you've been circling the same mountain for years. You're not examining the path. You're avoiding the risk. You're not seeking clarity. You're postponing commitment. That's the dangerous thing about fear. It knows how to wear a mask. It knows how to sound smart, even spiritual. But fear in disguise is still fear. And the longer you let it linger, the louder it gets. There comes a moment in every person's life when they have to choose between comfort and calling. Comfort feels good, but it doesn't grow you. Calling stretches you. It exposes your insecurities and pushes your boundaries. It demands sacrifice. It will not coddle your excuses, but it will lead you into a life that matters. Most people stay stuck not because they lack opportunity, but because they're unwilling to endure the discomfort required to rise. You say you want change, but are you willing to face the fire that forges it? Are you willing to be misunderstood, to be seen starting small, to fail in public? These are the questions that define destiny. Fear is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Because fear is a feeling and feelings pass. Avoidance becomes a habit, and habits shape identity. You begin to believe you are the kind of person who just doesn't take risks or who isn't cut out for that. But that's not identity. That's inertia. And you can break it. You can stand in the face of fear and do it anyway. You can make decisions that contradict your emotions. You can feel afraid and still move forward. That's what bravery actually is, not the absence of fear, but movement in spite of it. And every time you move through fear, your confidence expands, your identity evolves, and your power multiplies. Hesitation is more dangerous than failure, because failure at least teaches. Failure moves you forward. Failure refines you. But hesitation keeps you in limbo. You never launch, never commit, never go all in. You live in the land of almost. And almost doesn't change lives. Almost doesn't feed your purpose. Almost keeps you stuck in cycles. When you hesitate long enough, it becomes your identity. People stop expecting you to rise. They start accepting your excuses. And worse, you start accepting them too. That's how dreams die, not in explosions, but in slow, silent hesitation. It doesn't take a miracle to change your life. It takes a decision. One firm, final, unwavering decision to stop shrinking, to stop hiding, to stop rehearsing every possible failure. The woman who said, "You're not stuck, you're scared," wasn't just pointing out fear. She was calling out power. She was reminding us that within every fear is the raw material of faith. That what we think is paralysis is often just permission we haven't given ourselves. You don't need anyone to unlock you. The key is already in your hand. And once you realize that, once you truly own that, everything shifts. It's funny how quickly life starts to open up when you stop waiting for perfect confidence and start moving with imperfect courage. Doors you thought were locked start swinging open. People you thought would ignore you start taking notice. Resources you thought you lacked start appearing. But it never happens while you're standing still. Momentum is a magnet. It pulls in provision, people, and possibility. But you only build momentum by moving, not by overthinking, not by doubting, not by delaying. The most successful people are not those who had all the answers. They're the ones who kept walking when others froze. Fear will always speak. It will always suggest caution. It will always whisper worst-case scenarios. But you don't have to listen. You get to choose which voice gets your focus. And whichever voice you feed will become the loudest. Feed fear, and fear leads. Feed faith, and faith leads. And faith doesn't require the full map, just the next step. It doesn't ask you to leap blindly. It asks you to trust deeply. That may be what's waiting for you on the other side of fear is far greater than anything you've experienced in the safety of the known. And maybe the only thing truly holding you back is a lie you've been believing for too long. There's something sacred about struggle that most people try to skip. We live in a world that glamorizes instant results. Fast money, quick success, overnight transformation. But the truth is nothing of real value comes without pressure. Diamonds don't form in open air. Gold isn't made on the surface. Pressure is the birthplace of power. That 92-year-old woman leaned forward and said, "People keep asking for ease, not knowing it's the hard that makes you holy." And when she said that, you could feel something shift in the room, because deep down, we all know it. The fire that we try to run from is often the fire that forges our greatness. You don't become strong by avoiding resistance. You build strength by facing it. Every weight you carry, every tear you've cried, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, they're not evidence of failure, they're proof of formation. You are being formed, not forgotten. And while others may not see what you're carrying, heaven does. The long nights, the silent battles, the moments where you keep showing up even though you feel unseen and underappreciated, those moments matter. Because greatness isn't born in the spotlight, it's born in the shadows where no one claps and no one notices, but you keep going anyway. The struggle is your soil. That means the very thing you've been resenting may actually be the thing that's developing your roots. Everyone wants fruit, but no one wants to be buried. Yet the seed doesn't complain when it's covered. It trusts the process. That's what separates people who rise from people who quit. They understand that darkness is not punishment. It's preparation. When you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" the whole situation changes. You shift from victim to student, from passive observer to active participant in your own transformation. Too often, we pray for strength and then question the struggle that comes to build it. But you can't be strong if you're never stretched. You can't be wise if you've never wrestled. That's why people with depth often have a history that most never see, because they've learned how to stay standing in seasons where others would have folded. They've learned how to worship with tears in their eyes. They've learned how to walk forward even when fear is screaming. The struggle didn't destroy them, it disciplined them. And discipline is the foundation of destiny. There's a version of you on the other side of this pain that will thank you for not giving up. You can't see them yet, but they're watching. The stronger you, the wiser you, the more grounded, more powerful, more aligned version of you is waiting to be born from this. But birth is never painless. Ask anyone who's ever brought something into the world. It costs something. It requires labor. You cry, you push, you reach a point where you think you can't do it. And that's when you're closest. That's when the breakthrough is about to happen. Pain isn't the end. It's a sign that something real is coming through. What we forget is that every champion was once a contender that refused to quit. They didn't skip the pain. They went through it. They didn't escape the fire. They endured it. And in the process, they became something the fire could no longer burn. Their skin got tougher. Their spirit got deeper. Their mind got sharper. That's the gift of struggle. It doesn't just make you strong, it makes you solid. It's not just about surviving hard seasons. It's about becoming unshakable in them. And when that happens, you stop flinching at difficulty. You stop doubting your capacity. You stop backing down when the pressure rises. The problem is, we've been trained to believe that hard means wrong. But what if hard means right? What if resistance is just confirmation that you're moving in the direction of your calling? If it was easy, everyone would do it. If it was comfortable, it wouldn't change you. But because it's hard, it has the power to shape you. It has the power to reveal what's in you. It forces you to rely on faith, to develop discipline, to focus your energy and rise above your old limits. And maybe that's the point. Maybe struggle isn't just something to survive, but something that summons the strongest version of who you really are. So next time you're tempted to curse the weight, consider this. Maybe that weight is your workout. Maybe the pressure isn't a sign that you're losing, but that you're leveling up. The old woman didn't say, avoid the struggle. She said, respect it. Because it's holy. Because it's necessary. Because it's making you into something you don't even have the full language for yet. And while the world around, you may not understand your process, you don't owe them an explanation. You owe yourself obedience to the assignment. Keep pushing. Keep standing. Keep walking through the fire that's forming you. Most people live their entire lives waiting for permission to dream, to act, to speak, to shine. They sit in the back rows of their own destiny, waiting for someone to call their name. But what if no one ever does? What if the breakthrough you're waiting for is actually waiting on you? That's what the 92-year-old woman was talking about when she said, if you don't give yourself permission, don't expect the world to. Her words weren't loud, but they carried a weight. The weight of wisdom earned through decades of watching people hesitate their way into regret. She had seen too many people bury their potential under politeness, under fear, under the need for someone else's validation. There is nothing more tragic than a person who dies full of dreams, full of potential, full of untapped brilliance. Not because they didn't have talent, but because they were too afraid to look arrogant, too afraid to be misunderstood, too afraid to offend people by living fully, And yet the truth is this: someone is always going to misunderstand you. Someone is always going to be uncomfortable with your light. But that's not your burden to carry. It's theirs. Your responsibility is to step into the fullness of who you are, not shrink to make others comfortable. That woman said, let them be uncomfortable. That's how you know you're doing something real. Your gift is not up for debate. It's not a question mark. It's a fact. You were born with something the world needs. But facts ignored become futures abandoned. And too many people are experts at downplaying their greatness. They apologize for taking up space. They dilute their voice. They second guess their instincts. But your assignment doesn't care about your self-doubt. It doesn't disappear because you feel insecure. It waits quietly, patiently, sometimes painfully. But it waits until the day you realize you don't need more approval. You need more agreement with your own calling. And once that agreement is made, things start to move. When you start walking in purpose, you stop begging for permission. You stop looking around to see who's clapping. You stop waiting for a round of applause to validate your next step. Because purpose doesn't perform, it produces. It produces fruit, impact, transformation. And most of the time, it produces it in silence. People don't always see it. They don't always applaud it. But it grows anyway. And that's where real confidence is built. Not from the noise of the crowd, but from the quiet conviction that you were made for more, and you're finally saying yes to it. One of the most powerful things the woman said was this: you don't owe your younger self an explanation, you owe your future self a commitment. That line hits deep because we spend so much time replaying old decisions, dissecting past mistakes, rewriting the story in our heads of what we should have done. But none of that changes what's ahead. What changes your future is not reflection alone. It's decision. It's commitment. It's waking up and choosing to do the work, even when your feelings haven't caught up yet. It's showing up to your own life like it matters, because it does. Too often, people wait to feel ready before they move, but readiness is a myth. Nobody feels ready to do something they've never done. Confidence comes after the action, not before. That's why bold people look brave, not because they're fearless, but because they move while they're afraid. They act while their hands are shaking. They speak even when their voice trembles. And somewhere along the way, the fear starts to shrink and the power starts to grow. That's the difference between people who stay stuck and people who move forward, not who had less fear, but who had more faith in what was possible beyond the fear. There's something divine about deciding. It shifts things. It closes the door on old versions of you and makes space for something new to emerge. When you decide, you stop negotiating with doubt. You stop entertaining the opinions of people who haven't earned the right to speak into your destiny. You stop making excuses that sound noble, but only serve to keep you small. Decision breaks the cycle. It unlocks energy. It draws new alignment. It signals to life itself that you're ready to participate, not just spectate. And when life sees someone who's all in, it starts to respond in kind, with open doors, with new connections, with unexpected resources. The woman didn't tell stories of regret. She didn't talk about missed chances. She talked about moments when she knew she had to move, to speak, to act, and she did. Not because she was confident, not because the timing was perfect, but because she understood something most people never learn. Your life is your responsibility, not your parents, not your friends, not your critics, yours. And the longer you wait for someone else to activate your potential, the longer you stay stuck in a life that was never meant to be yours in the first place.